Representative Cawthorn, great to see you. Great to be here. We got the tour too with the family and everything.
Ryan, I'm telling you, I'm so glad you guys came up. This has been the highlight of my week, no doubt. Because obviously, I always say that people here in Washington, they're not normal Americans. They're not God-fearing, family-loving, just good-hearted people. And so it's good to have some normalcy here. So I'm glad you came in.
Do you think it's what is it that attracts? Like you say, they're not normal people. So is there something that is attracting that type of personality or person?
I'll tell you, one, I actually think that for the most part, this place, I think, attracts the best people. I really do. I really think it attracts probably some of the most patriotic, best people. But then when they get here, all that idealism, slowly gets chipped away at and turns into pragmatism. And then you're becoming more and more and more pragmatic. And then you're just like, okay, well, if I really want to affect change, I should wait till I get to this next echelon of power. So I'm going to do what I have to do here to be able to get there. And, people will just understand when I really start making change. But the problem is, when you get that next echelon of power, you realize, there's still a lot of roadblocks. Now I need to get to this next echelon of power. And then all of a sudden you realize it's been 10, 15, 20 years, and you haven't done anything for the people you purported to come here for.
Right.
And then you've calloused your conscience and your heart, and you're willing to do anything to gain more power, and it's almost just become a habit and a game to you to gain more power but not actually do anything with it.
Do you think most people, though, come to D.C. with that type of noble intentions of wanting to serve and do that, or do you think there's some bad players from the get-go?
So I'll tell you, I think most people come here with noble intentions. I think then they get turned into pragmatists because it's a very difficult game to play, especially for a lot of these people who, they're not political animals. A lot of people are just first-time politicians. They come here, and so then they get hit by, just these incredible debaters, great fundraisers, great orators, these people who can manipulate the hearts and minds of millions of people at one time. And they're like, wow, I'm going up against all this. I'm going to have to fight fire with fire. But I will say, because it's turned so many people into pragmatists, I think all of a sudden it does attract a good amount of people who come here and they say, oh, I want to be in the middle of the game. I love the backstabbing. I love the cloak and dagger. I love the Machiavellian nature of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I see a big contingent of new people coming to DC. Men like yourself, men and women like yourself, young, ready to go, like have these American values, traditional American values. And then you see a lot of former military members as well.
Oh, yeah.
I was watching on Fox News this morning, in fact. They were talking, I think they had either 5 or 6 former Navy SEALs who were all running for Congress. And so it's really interesting to see a new group of people, not these career or family legacy type politicians coming to this arena.
Yeah, no, I know you probably know Marcus Luttrell. I actually just got to meet Marcus in person.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Really, really cool, because he stopped me. He's like, hey, I know you. And I was like, oh, my gosh, it's an honor to meet you.
Right, yeah.
So it was great. But his brother, Morgan.
Yeah, Morgan.
Running,
I just texted him this morning.
No way. He's also running for Congress, also a Navy SEAL.
Yep.
And then it's pretty incredible. I'm telling you, I think the Navy SEALs do bring something that's necessary here, because I'll tell you, the people that do want to run for Congress, you do need to be idealistic, and you need to have such a strong foundation in your ideals that no amount of doing what's necessary to get it done will change those.
Right.
But you also need to be able to be an operator. You need to be someone who's going to come here and just be able to realize there's a mission that needs to be accomplished, and we need to be tactical about it. We need to be smart about it. We need to plan out know our enemy's weaknesses and other pressure points.
Right.
I mean, my chief and I is also one of my best friends. We literally just spend almost all working hours figuring out the weaknesses and the strengths of other people, so that we can then push those pressure points when needed to be able to accomplish good things.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing. I mean, as you were giving us a tour today of the Capitol building, I asked you, I said, and I thought, man, I shouldn't have asked him that. I should have asked him that when we were going to do the conversation. But I asked, do you like playing the game? And you said you do like playing the game. But it would be such a weird thing. I'm trying to figure it out, even for myself, of, okay, well, you got to play the game. You got to be good at it. But also, there's some, I won't say devious things happening, but you've got to have, I don't know what it is, maybe a little bit of a callous, or just understand what's actually happening. It seems like a weird position to be in.
It is a weird position to be in, but I'll tell you, I'm not sure if it's a callousness. It's almost a, you need to know what exactly you're achieving, set your goals, and put those down, and then work backwards from there. And then, you have very achievable steps. So it's always your next step. It's like, okay, well, I need to gain 5 people who will give me I will have done favors for them, so then they will owe me votes. So if I have this 5 people contingent, then then I can bring up this order in Congress, and then, you can play the parliamentarian game there and get what you want to have actually voted on the House floor. But you've got to love the competition. I mean,
sure.
You need to wake up hungry. Just to know that it's the whole thing. There's 2 wolves on a hill. Who's going to get there first? The hungry wolf or the one who's just had lunch, and the person who's hungry for it. And so I think at every single moment, some people come here and they want to be very, very careful, and they every step is planned out and everything. And that's why I'm against voting for kind of those typical politicians, the cookie cutter types, because this place is a dog-eat-dog world, and if you're not willing to fight the battles, then you're just going to bend the knee to the leadership, and then all of a sudden you'll next thing you know, you're just a vote in the hands of somebody else.
Right, you become a pawn in their game versus
Exactly.
you controlling the board the way that you want it to be controlled.
Right, which is how it's supposed to be. I mean, our founders literally thought that the desire for ambition would keep the 3 branches of government in check. Be like, okay, well, the legislature will be so ambitious that that they'll always be trying to push down the judicial branch, but the executive branch will be trying to push them down. It's like a rock paper scissors game. They're all so aggressive trying to take one another down that it'll keep us all even. But we actually, I would say probably 75% of the people here, their ambition is just to be in Congress, and they
just want to be here.
Yeah, they like being on the marble steps. They like seeing their name in the paper once every few weeks,
right?
That kind of thing. But at the end, they like being called the honorable. But at the end of the day, I'm telling you, that's not who we need here. You need people who are going to say, "Hey, you're a tyrant over in this branch. You need to settle down. The people are the voice." And I also think people shouldn't live here full time because they get caught up in that game.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, what's interesting too is it seems to me that the legislative branch overwhelmingly, and correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but has been willing to give so much power to the executive branch.
Oh my gosh.
I don't understand that. It's like, I agree with what you're saying, and I think the founders established this country in the way that our government is structured to check that ambition. And it's funny because you hear people say, well, nothing ever gets accomplished. Right. That's actually the point.
Right. Our government is designed to work slowly.
Right. But I think legislative branch has given so much power on both sides of the aisle, power to the executive branch, and I do not understand that for
I
life of
will
me.
explain it to you very simply, and you'll quickly understand. Again, we started electing a lot of these career politician types, these guys with pleated pants and tasseled loafers who, they're not here to fight the battles. They're here to just see their name in the paper again. And these people just want to get reelected, and so they don't want to have to take hard votes. So when it comes to difficult things like abortion or the real true arguments of the Second Amendment debate, they kick that over to the Supreme Court and the judicial branch. Or when it comes to war making, because that can be very popular or very unpopular. When it comes to setting regulations on different companies and environmental regulations, they say, okay, we'll put the executive branch and the 3 that are agencies. Because then if we cede all those powers, we don't ever have to make any hard decisions. And then we just get to pontificate on top of marble steps while people in our country are having to pay more and more money for gas prices. They're having to be less and less safe in their streets. We're having to see people be tormented all over the world.
Right.
And America's just taking a backseat to it all. And I think we need to take that power back because the problem is I say that we need term limits on Congress, but we also need to have term limits on bureaucrats and these people in the 3 that are agencies, because these people are not elected. They're not voted for. So the people have no cause for recourse or way to be able to go and say, hey, I don't like what you're doing, change it or I'm going to fire you.
Right.
And that's what the House of Representatives is supposed to be. And so we're going to introduce some big changes. We want to put a few constitutional amendments into the thing. 1 on term limits, 2 to say that any regulatory powers has got to come through Congress.
So on term limits, I've heard, and I actually see both sides of it. Immediately, in my knee-jerk reaction as I hear term limits, I think that's a great idea. It eliminates these career politicians. You've had your time to do things. If you haven't done anything, that's on you. I see the purpose for having that. But also, I was talking with Sean Parnell. Do you know Sean?
I do.
And he was talking about, I don't want to misrepresent him, but he brought up an interesting point, how long it takes the system to go, and for somebody like yourself to really understand the system, to build up the credibility, and then term limits hinders that. And so all of a sudden you have a bunch of freshmen come in who don't really understand the system, and does that create problems.
So I will say no to that. One, because of the way our election processes work, you'll always have some veterans and some freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people who say that they would like to have term limits set at 4 years or something ridiculous,
Right.
which is wrong. And
Too short, you're saying?
Yeah, way
Right.
too short. Then I agree with Sean Parnell's position. I really like Sean. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
I actually want him to run for Senate. I think he'd be great in there. But if we were to actually have people only be here 4 years, they do not have enough time to actually get
That's
things
exactly.
done. And so I think we do need term limits, but it needs to be about 12 or 14 years. Give you a decade, a little more, because in my opinion, if you can't gain power in 3 or 4 terms, you're probably not that skilled. And then if you can't wield that power to get things done and to actually affect positive change, I
Right.
probably don't want you to represent me anyways.
Well, so that actually brings up a good point too, which I think is a counter to the term limits. Term limits are actually kind of built in because we have a voting system. But the problem is people, I think people are just lazy, frankly. And so, oh yeah, Representative Cawthorn, oh yeah, he's been there for 20 years. Let's
Yep.
just keep going.
I'm
I
telling-
don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at the
The incumbency
issues.
advantage is mind-boggling.
Right.
These people, since the turn of the 20th century, we've enjoyed almost a 90% re-election rate.
Is that right?
Yeah,
I knew it was high. I didn't know it'd be that.
It's very high, and so I mean, I could get into all the details because we're on government property. I can't go into all. I can't really go into electioneering very much, but I will tell you there are ways you can use this system to basically further your name ID to a point that no one else ever could in an election because you have the federal government backing you.
Right.
And so it's the mobilization, the logistics, the difficulty, the name identification rate, all those things that play into elections. This office gives you such an unparalleled advantage to be able to win that, and we have a lot of laws that are designed to help make challengers more viable. But
Sure, right.
It's just not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much, like you said, credibility, weight, finances that come into play, and all the connections. I mean, as you and I walked around, even as we walked from this building into this Capitol building, you knew people. I could tell you were talking. You were trying to build rapport with them, and so your connections alone would give you or anybody else a huge advantage.
Oh, big time. Because, I mean, let's say all of a sudden, oh, gosh, you know what? I'm going up against a candidate who's way better on issue B than I am.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden, then it's like, wait a minute, I actually know the ultimate champion of issue B. They owe me a favor. I'm going to have them come to my state and campaign for me.
Right.
And then it completely negates my opponents.
What's the balance? And I've always been curious about this because I see representatives who I think probably do a pretty decent job representing their people, and then it seems like there's other representatives who feel like once they're elected, that means that their voters just give them full authority to make their own decisions, regardless of what the voters have to say. So, what is the balance for you for that? Between, okay, I'm representing what they want
Right.
versus I think this is the direction we need to go, and maybe that's at odds with what your voters want.
So I'll tell you, I think we're supposed to be statesmen. The best kind of congressmen, the best kind of senators, the best kind of people in politics are statesmen. And so we have a representative government. So I believe that I am here. The reason we have our government set up the way it does is because, if your average corn farmer, the person who is a lineman or a pipe fitter or whatever job they have, or even a financial advisor back home, they also have a job. They also have their children. They have a lot of things to keep up with. And I believe that they need to stay up to date on things that are going on in politics and in the civic world. But the reason we have a representative government is because I'm here to vote as if all my constituents were all voting on every single issue. But the problem is they wouldn't have any time. You'd be going to the ballot box every day.
And they're not all going to vote the same.
Exactly.
So you're going to have both sides of the fence that you're trying to represent.
Right. And so I represent the will of my people. So really, when you're electing someone, I actually disagree on people who focus heavily on policy during elections. You need to be able to, I think you need to show, and people should push you so you can show that you have an understanding of the policy, make sure you're not an idiot.
Right.
But I think what's much more important than that is your values. Because once you establish your values, then I know, okay, you're going to vote the way I would if I was privy to all the details at one time. You were like my kind of guy. You're my kind of woman. You and I believe the same. We share the same value set, so we'll make the same decisions when push comes to shove. And so talking about that, there are some times when the mainstream media will sway public opinion so much in one direction and get people fired up. Sometimes the great thing about a Republican system of government, small R Republican system of government, is that your representatives within the republic then can kind of be a check on that knee-jerk, emotion-based decision-making and say, hey, I've been focusing on this issue a long time. I know we're all really fired up about it to go this one direction.
Right.
And I know that this terrible shooting just happened and everybody's really upset about guns and everything. But if we get rid of guns, I promise it's going to turn out badly in the long run.
Right.
And so, if everybody was really upset about a shooting that happened in my district, they all wanted me to vote to get rid of the Second Amendment, I wouldn't do it. And because I believe that is what's in line with the values of my district the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of look at it. This is a weird analogy. You're going to think it's weird when I say it, but I think it makes sense. Is a father, for example, isn't going to isn't going to take everybody's thought about the way the family should be run with equal weight.
Exactly.
Right? Like at some point, I need to make an executive decision
right.
because I'm the father and I have a responsibility for my family.
Yes.
Do you feel the same or similar to that?
I feel very similar to that. It's but you need to know your family, right? You know exactly what's best.
True. Good point.
You know them well, so you can know what's best for them. And I'm a representative of my people, but it's at times if people are really fired up and emotional about things, you as a father will be able to see your son's just really upset and say, son, I know that you just want to run away right now, but I promise if you ran away, your life's going to turn out really poorly. Like, let's just,
sure.
I'm going to say no to this.
Right.
And so sometimes when I see people people are just emotionally upset about something, I say, once your emotions calm down, I know reason will win out, and you would decide this way. So I'll be a check on that.
That's a good point. So you feel like in a way you're managing those emotional reactions to the news and the media and the culture and society and all of this. I imagine you have a greater insight into some of this that me as a regular civilian wouldn't have.
Well, and really, you're a dad. You have to run your podcast. You have to run your show. You have to run your store. You have to run all these things. You have to build a canoe. You've got a lot of things in your mind, right?
Yeah, sure.
This is what I do. Politics is what I do. I know the nitty-gritty details. You want to talk about thorium reactors or molten salt reactors inside of a small unit nuclear facilities? I can talk about that. You want to talk about the actual harm that's going on the southern border through a porous immigration policy?
Right.
I can talk about that. You want to talk about the reason why if you let a citizenry give up their firearms, they are no longer citizens, they are then subjects.
Sure.
I mean, I would be able to go into all of those little tiny details for you because that's what I do all day long. And you would be able to do the exact same thing. But that's why we have this Republican version of government where we say, hey, I want you to go, you have my same values, go focus on all these issues and vote like I would. Go.
Yeah, the values conversation is interesting. I never considered that, but it brings up a good point because what I've seen a lot of people do, politicians do, once they're elected, they run on a platform and then nothing, or they vote exactly opposite of the platform they ran on, which is a very frustrating thing for their constituents.
Now
I'm sure.
If that ever happens, your representative lied to you, and you need to vote him out of office.
Yeah.
If you ever try and get elected on something, then you should wait a full election until after a whole other election to go back to your people and say, I've actually changed my mind on this. This is my new belief. Because I'm telling you, you lie to the American people, you shouldn't be in Congress. It's disgusting.
It's just there's just so much ignorance, and I don't say that with any sort of like ill intent when I say ignorance. I just mean that there's so many people who are ignorant. Their heads are buried in the sand. They don't care about this stuff. You're talking about fathers going out and doing their thing. And I get it, and I've said it. I'm like, oh, it's a nightmare, and I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to think about it. Politicians are scum. Like, I've said that stuff.
Well, politicians are scum. I just want to point that out.
And people, so that's what I'm saying. So they don't want anything to do with it, and so they completely wash their hands and think, well, it's just going to get better. Or I've heard people say things like, my life is better when I, completely turn off the news and I don't think about what these politicians are doing. I'm like, well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but we do need to be informed because if you don't have any sort of skin in the game, you have no say in the direction of this country and then, of course, your life and how it's impacted.
Exactly. And, I mean, government affects 80% of your life. I mean, it touches probably 80% of the things that you do. And so I think that, one, of course, people should not sit here and focus on the news. They shouldn't watch the news 24/7. They shouldn't let that dictate how they're going to feel the entire day. But you should everyone should be informed. They should know what's going on. They should try and make their voice be heard. They should be civically involved, civically responsible, really. Because I genuinely believe, I know you have a lot of men that watch your podcast. As a father, it is your duty to make sure that your family has a safe environment to grow in, to become better in. And I believe this is that safe environment. It's our country. And you will let it just go into an ash heap, into ruin, if you just bury your head in the sand and say, my blood pressure goes up whenever I watch the news, so I'm not going to do that. It's like, okay, well, then when you are living under a socialist dictator and we're remanded to the ash heap of history, just know it was because of people like you.
Do you think that is the direction that we're going, or is that hyperbole?
I genuinely believe that there's a socialist movement afoot in our country. Socialist, communist, whatever you want to call it, really state ownership of just about everything, where it's kind of central planning, where people in Washington, D.C. plan out the lives of everybody else because they believe that they are smarter than their constituents and they need to hold their hands and wipe their snotty noses. That's what a lot of people up here believe. I mean, I remember there's one career politician on our side of the aisle, and I was going back home. He said, "Hey, man, you're headed back to hang out with all those rednecks?"
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I looked right at him. I was like, "Dude, I am one of those rednecks.
Right.
I'm not one of you. Get away from me, man."
I was going to ask you that because you said politicians are scum. Do you consider yourself a politician?
I do not know.
What's the difference?
Politicians are people who are up here genuinely because they love politics, not because they love the country. They love the game of it. They love the thrill of being in competition with people, and they love seeing their name in the paper. This is the only way they're able to become famous, and so they're just become a B-list celebrity, and they think it's great. And so that's what I consider to be a politician.
It's very alluring.
Oh, it is.
I've only been to D.C. twice. This is my second visit. And even just walking around, there's something very alluring about it. So I could see, these buildings and the history, and what's taking place here, and the people who are here do have power, of course. So it's a very alluring thing that entices you to want to be part of.
Ryan, I'll tell you, this is probably the best job in the world. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. You have to put up with a lot of just BS, and a lot of stuff just kind of sucks about it. But the ability to be able to direct millions of dollars, every congressman has this power. We can all direct millions of dollars of federal funding to whatever we think is necessary.
Right.
There's a great human trafficking prevention or a childhood abuse center in my district. And I think that they should be elevated. They just don't have the money to do it. They've got a great system. I was like, oh wait, I can fix that. Here's a federal grant. You're good to go.
Yeah.
If one of my friends calls, hey, I'm trying to get out of the country. My honeymoon's coming up. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a passport. It's like, cool. I can fix that problem for you. Done. And then you have the ability to cut through all bureaucratic red tape. You have the Mont Blanc to call just about anybody up on the planet and say, hi, I'm Congressman Madison Cawthorn. They'll take your call.
Right.
And then you get to, and it's a phenomenal thing to have that kind of power to be able to wield that. And so, one of the main tenets of this office that we will always be a good steward of that. We will consistently become better at our organizational abilities. We will consistently become better at our outreach abilities, so we get more input from our district and know more about that. We get to save more people from the lies of socialism in our country, and we will consistently tighten our vision, and so that we always know what our goals are and the direction we're moving. And I think being a good steward of the power you're given here is incredibly important. But I'll tell you, being in Congress is sexy. You start looking at it, it's a fun thing to do.
Well, even just going from one building to the other, the amount of people that that know you, that recognize you. I'm sure that has its perks, but also its downfalls as well.
Yeah, it does. There's a thing called DC Huddle. You cannot go out anywhere without seeing your name pop up on, Madison Cawthorn and Rand Paul were at the Dubliner having a Guinness. And what were they talking about? Then you have all kinds of people start saying, is there a big conspiracy going on here? Or,
no, we're just having a beer. Yeah.
But it's so perks and downfalls for sure. But
how do you keep it in check? You have this power, you have this to the will to pen and even will to finances. So how do you personally keep that in check, not allow it to get to your head, and not allow you to engage in any sort of behavior that other people might really be interested in abusing?
Yeah, so one thing, my faith in God really keeps me from corruption. There's a lot of verses in the Bible that kind of pontificate on and point towards the idea that leaders of people and teachers of people will be held to a higher account when they get to heaven. And so I realize I'm probably going to be held to a higher account, and God's watching everything I do. You remember when we were going through the tour, and you said, there's that woman from Greek mythology on that winged chariot that flies around and writes down all your deeds. Well,
right.
That's a great little image of what I think God actually does, genuinely watches all of your deeds. And so I know that I'll be judged for that. But furthermore, how you keep it from going in your head, I'm kind of lucky in a sense that I'm in a wheelchair. I just have to deal with, anybody in a wheelchair that's watched this, you guys know what I'm talking about. There's a million small obstacles you have to overcome every single day, some very, very humbling and humiliating things that happen to you all the time. And so that keeps my humility in check. And if it doesn't, I've got a really, really great Hispanic wife who will start yelling at me.
Line you out pretty well.
Oh, yeah, she'll get me back in line.
Yeah, when you talk about the humiliating thing with being in the wheelchair, I can't imagine what that would be like, especially early on. But it seems like you've embraced it. It seems. What other choice do you have?
Yeah, well, I mean, since again you're big on fatherhood, I'll tell you, my dad did something that was so amazing. I mean, he basically was just saying, "Son, you're not living a real life, and so if you just need to make the decision if you're gonna just
after the accident."
After the accident, this is a couple of years after, and I was just depressed. Everything was so bad, focusing on all the accumulating things, the negative aspects, and basically, I can't imagine how hard it would be for a dad to say this, but saying, "Son, you need to just make a decision if you're gonna, you need to make a decision how you're gonna continue. If you're just gonna keep living like this, you shouldn't do it.
Really,
it's not worth it."
Wow.
And he's like, "So you need to make a decision. Are you gonna live in spite of the wheelchair, or are you gonna let it define you?"
Do you feel like he knew he was saying what needed to be said to push you in the right direction?
Yeah, I do. I think he knew what my decision would be, but I can't imagine.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, someone who has the means to do what was being lightly implied, but also to just sit there and to leave the room and me sitting there for hours trying to make the decision. And I literally made a T-graph of pros and cons to living.
Really?
Yeah, and
so that thought the thought of ending it did cross your mind.
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding? Yeah, I mean, no matter, I could have the best day at that point in my life. I could have had the best day I had ever since the accident. Everything could be going great. It could be laughing. I'm not in much pain. Everything's going well. But then I had this creeping thought coming in the back of my head. It's like, you're having so much fun. Oh, but imagine how much more fun it would be if you could walk.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, then robs of all the joy. It's like, yeah, and then you just get into this depression. But after that, I really became very serious on building a mental framework and a mental structure that says, hey, if I start thinking this thought, I need an alarm to go off that says this leads here. You know where this thought leads. You need to move on.
Right.
And I think that you need to have allowed yourself to mourn and to have felt all those thoughts so you know which ones lead to negative areas. But it was really difficult in the very beginning, but now it's just, this is the fact where I'm at in life. And I got to tell you, although I have all these difficulties and a lot of problems and a lot of things I wish I could change, and I hate being like 4'8". It's not fun. I gotta look up all the time.
Get a kink in your neck all the
time. But you know what? I've got a great life. I got a great wife, got an awesome family. I get to literally, I get to do a job that millions of people would want to do, and it's fantastic.
What was it like when you came to DC for the first time? I mean, once you were elected and you
once
came
I was
here.
elected and came here, man, it's the bridges that get me. When you drive across all the bridges, you see all the statues, really just the glory. I mean, you feel like you're driving into Rome when it was probably at its height of its power, and you're just looking around. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this is literally where you're serious. I get to work here.
Right.
Like I know you guys said I got elected, but this is my office.
I know, sitting in your office. When I walked in earlier before you got here, I'm like, this is incredible. This is such a cool place.
It's the best. And you and I were talking, I think I mentioned it to you. I think when people lose that lackluster, when people lose that luster of thinking what an honor, what a privilege, how phenomenal is this place. When they lose that, they should stop being in Congress. I mean, it's gotten too old for you.
Do a lot of politicians, have they lost that?
I think so. Yeah. They just, to them it's just another election. Well, I try not to worry too much about the news of the day. They literally bury their heads in the sand. They don't even watch the news. They have their comm staff send out newsletters that make it look like they're paying attention to things, but they're just lazy. I mean, some people freaking work 4 hours a day here.
Really?
It drives me insane. I mean, my staff, when we're in session, we work about 16-hour days.
Yeah.
And
really.
And so I see a guy that comes in at like 11 and leaves at 3. I'm like, dude, what? Can you let me just send one of my friends to be you for a second? Because you are just wasting your office. If we were all united and as passionate as I am, as a lot of my other friends here are, we would change the country overnight. The whole world would say, I want to be an American citizen, and I want to destroy my dictators, my tyrants. I want my politicians to be like that.
What? So when you say that, you say we would change America overnight, and there's a lot to shit on for sure, and there's a lot to be concerned with, and there's issues that I personally have, but there's also a lot of good.
Oh my gosh!
And the level of freedom that we have, and the prosperity and the opportunities, it's amazing, unlike any other time in the history of this planet. So when you say change America, what do you mean when you say that?
Number one thing, for all the politicians share the same luster I do for this country and worked like I do, or worked like a lot of my friends in this office, in this institution do, you would instantly see a cultural shift away from the idea that our founding fathers were racist. You would see a cultural shift away from the idea that our heritage is evil. You would see a cultural shift away from the fact that we need to apologize for being American. You would start seeing people being proud to be an American again. You would see this renewed renaissance break out where people wanted to literally make themselves the best versions they can be so that they could serve their nation better. I genuinely believe that. And then you would completely rob the mainstream media of all of their because they just want to sensationalize all the drama that happens in Washington because it gets clicks, it gets profit, and that's what their board needs. Their board wants to make money, so they want to sensationalize the news so people click on their things more often.
Right.
Charge more for advertisements. But you would instantly change that to be like, yeah, there is no drama here. We all working to save America. And we would all be so committed to one another. Say, you and I might disagree on exactly how to, if we should tax, capital gains or if we should tax, 401ks, Roth IRAs, that kind of thing.
Right.
We might disagree about that. But I would, if we were all committed to the future of America like I am, I disagree with my colleagues a lot. I'm talking about my friends. If I leave, people will run up to us. Hey, it sounded like you guys had a tense meeting. What was it in there about? I was like, we were just talking about sunshine and motherhood. Everything's great. We've never been more united. Because I would never expose them to the fact that the media can sensationalize some argument that we had or something. Because I know we're both working for the betterment of the future of America.
So you say the media is doing it, and I agree with that. But I also think politicians are doing it. Because they're trying to convince people that they're valuable.
Exactly.
You need me because these are the issues. Well, my wife and I were talking about race, for example, because you brought it up a minute ago. We were talking about it the other day. I don't think it's as prevalent as everybody's making it out to be, but when you do sensationalize it, you give yourself some sort of value. Whether it's the media, they give themselves value because they're printing, journalists. And I use quotation marks deliberately. But then you also have politicians who are pitting each other against each other because now, see, this is what I'm doing. This is my job to defend against this. It's like, what are you talking about? These aren't as big issues, I don't think, as a lot of people are letting on to believe.
I genuinely don't believe they are. Something that I believe, and this is something that you've been hearing in culture a lot. Say, you actually can't say that you're colorblind, that you don't see race.
Right.
Right. That's actually a racist thing to say because you need to focus on these things. That's a lie. I have probably 3 different ethnicities that work for me. I do not care what color they are. I do not care what their background is. I do not care what their religion is. Mm-hmm. As long as I just want the best person to do the best job. Your color means nothing to me. I don't want to focus on it. You don't even need to comment on it. Unless you're just making it. We're all just joking around about the funny things that.
Which you can't do really anymore either.
You can't.
Which is insane.
Absolutely. But which is awful. But I found that when people say you can't say that you don't care about someone's race, reject that. Say I don't care about your race. I literally don't care. Mm-hmm. And if you want to call me a racist for saying I don't care about your race, then you're literally focusing on race. And I don't define things by race. And let's all just be. I'm going to judge you on the content of your character. If you're a sucky person, you're a sucky person.
Right. It's got nothing to do with race or any of that economic status or anything like that. You can find good and bad people across the spectrum.
Yeah, you can find bad pastors, you can find bad doctors, you can find bad politicians, bad cops. But guess what? The overwhelming majority of Americans agree on 80% of the issues. That these politicians, the ones that you're talking about, who are trying to make themselves sound self-important, they will then say, let's get everyone to narrowly focus on these 20% of issues that divide everybody. Let's convince them that is their literal identity.
Right.
And that's so far from the truth. And now in Washington, D.C., there's some people I vehemently disagree on with probably 90% of the issues. But the general population of America, I travel around a lot, we agree on just about everything.
Yeah, I found that to be true too. But I almost also wonder if it's just self-confirming biases, right? Because I say, here's my issues, here's what I believe in, here's what I think, and then I have somebody like yourself who believes the same things that I do. We hold the same values to be, important. So am I just confirming my own biases, right? Or traveling throughout the states, who am I going to talk with? Well, of course, I'm going to talk with people like myself. So am I just reiterating, saying that, well, see, everybody believes this, but yet it's only the people I hang out with.
Right. No, that's a really, really good point. I try to purposely surround myself with people that are different than I am. But I will, that is something to be conscious of, is that, perhaps we do attract the people that we agree with about everything on. So does everybody agree, or is it just our friends?
Right. Yeah. How do you deal with, you're talking about surrounding yourself with people that you don't agree with. How do you deal and work with people you don't like? Because I'm sure that happens all the time here.
Because I am here to serve the people of Western North Carolina, and I don't care who I have to work with to get that done. I'll never sell my soul to make it work, but aside from that, short of that, I don't care who I have to work with. If you're someone who has a vote that I need, or you have a piece of something that I need to be able to achieve something for my district, I'll work with you even if I don't like you. And I'll probably even make some jokes. But yeah, you know what? I really dislike you as a person, but we work great together.
Right.
I've told people that many times.
Right.
So.
It would be hard, though, because you're going to have people who I imagine will not work with you, not because they really care about the issues or anything, just out of spite. Or they'll try to backstab you or
Big time.
Get you into a corner. And how do you work with those individuals? Like, what do you do to actually bring them around? One
of my favorite quotes is that no one has ever hurt me or no one has ever helped me or harmed me that I have not repaid in full. And if you make it very clear that's something that you believe in, that's especially up here, people will take a second breath about crossing you. And so now there are a lot of people who will put you on a blacklist and they'll never deal with you ever again. But that's the name of the game up here. And so, but you know what, as outspoken as our office is and my team is about a lot of issues,
right?
A lot of people say, oh, well, you can never. A lot of people, these career politicians go back and say, well, the reason you don't hear me talking about the issues that matter to you is because I'm up there playing the Washington game. You just don't understand. Well, I've actually been here now, and I've never commented on that because I was like, maybe I don't understand. Maybe I'm ignorant about it. They're lying. You can be incredibly outspoken. You can be incredibly a stalwart for your values, and then you can piss a lot of people off on the other side because you believe what you believe so strongly. But you can still get things done, and you just have to be shrewd about it. A lot of people who read the Bible, they remember the part that you need to be innocent as snakes, or innocent as doves, but they forget the part about being shrewd as snakes.
Right. Yeah, that would be the thing that would be a challenge for me, is like, how do you continue to work with these people? What's the balance between being kind and being pleasant and being respectful versus being, like you said, shrewd and trying to get what you want accomplished and figuring out a way to do it?
Yeah, it's a balancing act. There's a very narrow line to walk. Like you got to be, the line we walk is we want to really say things that are true and bold that a lot of other people are unwilling to say, but we don't want to be perceived as a bomb thrower. I don't want people to look at us and be like, oh, they'll just say whatever they need to get on the news.
And that's what I did want to ask you about, because you're obviously young in your career here and you've made a lot of waves. And I don't doubt that you believe wholeheartedly in everything that you've ever said, at least that I've heard you talk about. But I imagine other people interpret it as you're trying to rile people up, you're trying to stir people up, or you're trying to make a name for yourself. Do you get stuff like that?
We do get stuff like that, but there's 4 or 5 members on the other side, probably 2 or 3 members on our side who take it even a step further. And but so again, we try to kind of walk that line where I am saying bold things, I am saying things that make people kind of friends look at each other. Can you believe you just said that?
I can't exactly.
Like, what the holy hell?
The people in the back are like,
my comms director's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be up all night. Here we go. But at the same time, we don't want to go so far to the point where it's just extreme. The crazy stuff some people say.
Right.
Everything we say, I want you to, when someone's laying in bed at night, it's like, he did say that in a really bold way, but now I think about it, that actually holds a lot of merit, and he actually really backed it up with a lot of facts, a lot of data. And so we're very careful what we say. We've been working on message discipline, finding our targets, hitting them correctly. So everything we say, we can defend in a very articulate manner.
Right.
And I think that's something where it makes it to where you're not just making a name for yourself. You actually believe these things because they're right.
Yeah. So you said comms director. Is that what you said?
Communications director. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something I haven't really. It makes sense, but I haven't really considered that. So there's strategy that's going into, okay, we're going to talk about it in this way, or here's how we're going to frame this message or this bill that we want to pass or this
all the
resolution we
time.
want to bring up.
Yeah, because you know what? You have to accept the fact that a lot of people grew up in different cultures, and some words that you might, some phraseology that you might use might not make any sense to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I say, yeah, well, I mean, it's really just basically the width of a holler.
Yeah. Everybody's like, what's he talking
people
about?
who grew up in the mountains know exactly what I'm talking about, but people, flatlanders or people who live on the beach, they're like, what the heck is it? What is he yelling? What is holler?
Right.
And so, it's great to have so I've got my legislative department, which is made up of about 5 people. I've got my communications department, which is made up of about 3. And that's a large communications department, by the way. No, most people normally have 1.
Is that your decision or?
That was my decision, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Mainly because I believe that we are in a cultural war right now for our country, and if we are not as tactical and aggressive as we can be on the offense, then we allow the other side to control the narrative completely. And so that's why we boosted it to 3 people, and then but fortunately we're able to compensate that because most people have 2 front desk assistants. We actually have an unlimited list of interns who are willing to work for us, so it's great. So we were able to compensate or fix that deficiency we had when only having one front desk worker by having a lot of interns.
Got it.
And so we have that strong comms department. But again, I want to run things by people, and everyone in my staff has the right to question my decisions. And so you can, and I can normally always, if they question, I can normally defend it perfectly. But sometimes
you should be able to, right?
Yeah, it's like, wow, that is a fantastic point you just made. And so that's why we have our communications department, because we want to have a strategy in everything we do. A lot of people you'll find up here that just kind of get off and they'll just start spouting off the mouth, and the next thing you know, I've got some great debaters on my staff, and so we will sit there and be like, okay, if we were to attack this position, how would we do it?
Right.
And then so we never want to put ourselves in a corner where it says, oh wow, if they take it, they could bring up this fallacy, then all of a sudden then we're cornered, we're dead. And so there is a communications department. I'm not somebody who I don't necessarily use focus groups, because a lot of politicians are like, well, I don't want to use any words they haven't been ran through a focus group. But yeah, one thing, love him or hate him, Donald Trump, the one thing I really enjoyed about him was that you kind of knew what he was thinking, because he just said it. Right. And
unfiltered.
So I want to be a little bit more filtered than that, but I do want people to know what I'm thinking and how I feel. And I think people like that authenticity.
Do you think with Trump that obviously the filter was low, if not, non-existent, but do you think that was part of his strategy and his appeal to so many people?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Because, again, everybody's tired of these focus group politicians who are saying, yeah, well, you know what, I checked those messages about of saying that I believe in the rights of the unborn, and it only didn't play very well, so I'm only going to say things that are
That sounds so, it's just disingenuous.
It is disingenuous. I'm like, dude, I don't care what the focus group said. What do you believe?
Right.
But the problem is they don't have any beliefs. They just want power.
I think they have beliefs. Well, that's a good point. What you said, they just want power, and that is their value, right? They're the values they hold on to is the more power I can get, the better. So I'll say and do anything that I need to do in order to accomplish that, which is to secure more power.
Right.
But they tell themselves they're doing it for noble reasons.
Exactly. They're telling themselves once they get to that higher level of power,
like you were saying earlier,
they will then be able to help more people more quickly.
So how do you then keep that in check? Because one of the things that you showed me, in fact, it's right behind you. You've got your compass.
Yes, indeed.
And you had said that's to remind you to stay morally true, morally straight, right?
Yep.
But how do you know you're not telling yourself things or saying things to yourself or justifying or rationalizing to make it feel like you're being morally true, but you're actually deviating from that?
Because I also wear a compass around my neck, right here. And then I've got one tattooed on me as well. There's a good group of people who have them either tattooed on them or wear their compass around their neck as well. And that compass resembles the fact that we have the right to call each other out on our bullshit. And you
friends, you're saying
friends, very close friends, and they might be. It runs the gambit. Probably the oldest one's probably in his 50s. But then the rest are mainly my peers, 20s, 30s.
Sure.
And then we the guys that wear this compass, anybody in my inner circle, they all have the compass.
Interesting.
They're allowed to just call me out and be like, hey, man, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I always have, my right-hand man, we are basically ideologically aligned on everything we do. But also another guy in my inner circle, we don't agree on absolutely everything. We have the same, all the guys in my inner circle, we all have the same foundational principles, ones we will never deviate from. There's nothing that you can ever offer me that will make me say, okay, I'm turning away from this.
Right.
But the other things are all decently debatable, and you could convince me other things. And so I have somebody on my team who the non-foundational principles, believes a little differently than we do, and it's because I want to be called out and checked on those things, because I'm a big fan personally. In my mind, I can justify things that are wrong and say, oh, but I'm good with semantics, I'm good with words.
Right.
I can then convince myself, but really, if you look at it, if you kind of squint and look at it from this angle,
Right.
that 6 looks like a 9.
Yeah.
But my friends have for one, they have absolutely no sympathy for my wheelchair, which is terrible.
Good. That's actually what you need.
Oh, it's the best.
I
And
bet it's
so-
refreshing too, though.
Oh, it is, because everywhere I go, everyone's like, I remember I was complaining to somebody the other day. I was like, man, instead of going to Congress, I've gotten fat. I just really have. And this one guy was like, but man, for a guy in a wheelchair, you look great. Don't focus on the blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then my G was like,
Yeah, you are.
brother, you look fat as hell. Have you looked at yourself?
That's right. Those are the people that you need.
You do. You really do. And so I think the way that I check myself from making those moral problems and are justifying immorality is I have guys around me who believe stronger than I do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I tend to have the same personality where I fixate on a target. Like, here's what I want. I want to accomplish this. And I don't care what gets in the way or what I have to do or how I have to do it.
Exactly.
'Cause that's the target.
That's it.
And so I need the checks and the balances in place to say, no, we're not going to go down that route. We're not going to do this thing. What's the hardest thing about being here for you? Is there certain procedures or rules, or is it, just dealing with other people? Like, what is the most challenging thing about being here in DC for you?
The most challenging thing is the disappointment.
Disappointment?
Yeah, you know what? When I came up here, I genuinely believed that all 435 members of Congress would gather on the House floor. Nancy Pelosi would bring up, because she's Speaker of the House, would then bring up an issue that we were going to be voting on, and then I would deal with the best orators, the best debaters from the other side. They would come and vehemently debate against me, and we would have this battle of ideas, and we would get to sharpen one another. But then you can sit back and say, man, I really disagree with that person. They're kind of a borderline socialist, but that one aspect of their argument made a lot of sense. If we could add that one aspect to this guy's argument and put those together, then we'd really have something we could all agree on. And then I figured then we'd get to the House floor and we'd vote. But now I realize why Congress is so broken. It's because we don't do that. The decisions are made very far away in back rooms and
handshake deal type stuff?
handshake
Is that what you're saying?
deals,
Okay.
or just saying, hey, you know what? And really, the committee process is the biggest problem, because to get on a good committee that's where you can help your district the most, like, let's say someone from rural Colorado, they've got a lot of water issues, they've got a lot of mining issues, things like that. So they would like to be on the Natural Resources Committee. But there is the leadership of both parties commands all of the committee process.
Right.
And so saying, hey, you know what? I know you don't believe in this, but if you actually vote for it, then I'll remember that when we pick committees next session. And then everyone's like, oh, yeah, I got to do that, and they'll shake hands. And so
Right, that's that justification I was talking about.
that's exactly it. But unfortunately, that's not what happens. So if you ever see me on the House floor debating, you see things, they pan the cameras in so close, and I figured out it's probably very purposeful that they do this, because they don't want to show you the whole thing, because there's probably 6 people on the floor.
And you can see that a little bit, because I've
Yeah.
watched your stuff. I've watched other people's stuff, and I'm like, there's 2 people in there. There's 20 empty chairs. I mean, that's extreme social distancing, or nobody's there.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's really depressing about that. And I believe that, we should all be on the House floor together, and we should be debating, not making decisions way away on handshake deals, just saying, oh, whatever leadership needs, I'll do it.
Right.
Now, I'll tell you, my party, we actually have some really good leadership right now. But I'm just talking about previously the establishment here in Washington, D.C., kind of how it works. But I'll tell you, actually, I'm very pleased with our current set of leadership. They're actually doing a great job, and they're actually listening to the voice of the people. And I don't think that normally happens, and so I'm very, very pleased with that.
What is it specifically? Because I think it would be easy to say that, and I'm trying to see it from. I mean, you and I know each other personally,
Yeah.
right? So we have a better relationship than just some random person or somebody even listening. And I think what somebody would say is, well, yeah, you have to say that because that's your leadership, right? So what are the things that they are doing that make you say that?
So, number one, I believe that as our party is getting, my party, I'm a Republican, as we're getting more and more conservative in our beliefs and narrowly focused or condensed around that idea.
Do you think that's happening?
In the American people, I absolutely do.
I see a shift in the American people. I agree.
Yes.
But I see a shift even politically on the conservative side of the aisle that has moved the Overton window from these traditional conservative values to migrating more towards the center and even left.
Yes, and so I believe our people are becoming more and more conservative, but I believe for whatever reason the establishment National Party is becoming more centrist, which I don't understand.
And that's what I'm referring to.
Yes, and so that there's the Republican National Committee, the RNC, there's all these different things that make up the National Party. And for whatever reason, they're becoming more centrist as the people, I believe, are becoming more conservative and crying out for more just actual leadership. Hey, don't just tell me, tell me what you're doing. Lead me. Tell me what I can do to fix this. I don't like the direction our country's going. That's what I'm finding. And I'll tell you, although that's what kind of is going on with the National Party, I will tell you here in Congress, the person we currently have as leading us in our whip, and probably the fourth and fifth.
What is whip? What is that?
Whip. So literally think about it. Every whip in Congress is literally given an actual whip, and they keep hanging on their thing. So you're supposed to whip the votes. And so they are responsible for going out and executing the party's vision and being
interesting.
Like, I don't know why you're not voting for this, and I'm going to either give you a carrot or a whip to do so.
Got it.
And so that's what a whip is, and they're probably second in command. And then as you go down the line, you'll see that because it's actually a popular election up here. Once you win your election back home, you have to come up here, go straight into another election among all your peers. We have about 209 here in Congress. So I have 209 people that you have to convince to vote for you to be leader. And right now, a lot of conservative politicians, well over 51% of them, were elected under our previous president at the top of the ticket. And so they're very conservative, very populist-minded, very people-oriented. Right. And I'll tell you, I think our leadership in our party has actually taken note of that, unlike a lot of the National Party has. And they're kicking ass, man. I actually enjoy it. Our messaging battles, it's great. The reason why I think you're seeing such a good coalesced message from my side of the aisle in here is because the messaging is on point with what most members believe. And so we're actually capable of all. But yeah, I can get behind that. Let's go do it.
I'm just really glad to see guys like yourself doing it, stepping up and speaking up, because I've heard for so long this concept of the silent majority. And there's even people who tell me, it's like, there's going to be a bunch of people who don't like this particular podcast because we're talking about politics, because I'm talking to you. And it's like, I'm sick of playing the silent majority game. And that's what everybody's talked about. And they say things like, oh, well, once the silent majority wakes up. I'm like, well, wake up.
Wake up. Go. Yeah.
What are we waiting for?
$29 trillion in debt. Our children are going to have to pay unbelievable amounts of taxes.
Well, and even if you wanted to talk about the debt thing, like that's on both sides of the aisle. Every side of the aisle, spend. That's not your money to spend.
It's not.
And it doesn't seem like the people here are understand and realize that and acting accordingly.
Right.
It's a very frustrating thing.
It's incredibly frustrating. And to those people who say that they would get upset about this podcast because, one, we're focusing on politics, one, you're talking to me and those kind of things, is I would say, you know what? You just got to get over that. People just need to get over that. People don't like talking about politics because it's hard. People don't like talking about politics because it requires a lot of critical thinking. And we might be on different sides of the aisle, and people might not agree with every position I take. But you know what? I think that people who do podcasts and everything, I go on podcasts on the other side of the aisle, all kinds of things, because I just think I want to get my message out as much as I can, because I believe in my message. I genuinely do. But you know what? It's based in values, and I think what we need to do is come back around values. Don't get so caught up in incremental GDP increases at the end of the year, or get so caught up in corporate tax breaks. Let's focus on dining room politics. I mean, you've got 4 young kids. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's focus on making their life better. And what are you guys talking about at the dining room table that can make your life better? And so that I'll focus so much on dining room politics.
I think most people would say, including myself, the thing that a politician can do to make my life better is to stay out of it.
Boom, boom. And this is actually kind of what I would.
So where's the balance?
One more thing about this is what I genuinely believe. When they say politicians, I hope they're talking about federal politicians, because we do need to stay out of your life. We should be focused on war. We should be focused on trade. We should be focused on infrastructure. Mm-hmm. We should be focused on the enumerated powers in the Constitution, not all these 3-letter agencies who are telling you what to do in your life. I'm telling you, we should peel all that back. Our governor should become so kick-ass like Ron DeSantis. Say, I don't care about what your tyranny wants to be. Right. I don't care about your federal thing. My state doesn't believe that, so get that out of here.
Which is how it was it was established and how it should be.
Exactly. And so
Right.
to the people that are to your podcast, you're like, oh, I don't like the fact that you're talking to him, whatever. Blah, blah. Just know that I'm trying to become incredibly unimportant in your life. I'm trying to make our power here in Congress so limited that you don't even care what I think. That my opinion just doesn't matter that much.
So that's, I believe you when you say that. I'll preface with that. But that is also a conflict of interest with your job.
It is.
So how do you balance that?
So one of our number one things that we're going to be doing is voting. We will be putting a term limits bill on the House floor before I leave Congress.
What's the farthest a bill like that has
They
gone?
all died right on the floor, dead on arrival.
I mean, why would anybody vote themselves out of office?
Exactly. So we will be putting that on the House floor, and like you said, is it a conflict of interest? And I think it should probably be 12 years, so 6 terms in Congress. And when we put that on the House floor, I'm actually going to say to the people that I'm making this promise to, I'm not going to be helping you so much. It's not really going to make your and I lives better that much, Ryan. It really isn't. What it's actually going to change is the lives of our children. Because I think the only way to get people to vote for that is if you grandfather everyone who's already in Congress in, to where their clock starts that next election. They then have 12 more years.
Right.
Because the thing is, nobody's going to vote themselves out of power.
Of
They're
course.
too selfish.
Why would they do that?
And so I think that if we have a grandfather in clause where they then get to be, they have another 12 years no matter if they've been here 20 or 30, which I hate. I would love to make sure, like, oh, hey, no more career politicians for our lives, but it's really for our children.
Right.
It really is.
How's that? So you said you haven't presented it yet.
No, I have not. I need to go get some more friends elected first.
That's what I was wondering is how that process works, what's the steps, how it's being received, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so received. If we were to put this on if we were to put this as let every American in the country vote on this, it would pass right away. Almost 80% of Americans.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's great. Everyone recognizes it, but the people in Congress don't want to do it because it gets them out of their power. And so before we endorse anyone, that's a question we will actually ask them. And say, hey, you know what? I will come. I can literally make a huge difference in your election. I will send down my weapon. He will be there. He will teach you how to run a ground game. We will get your fundraising up. We'll do whatever you need.
What's your weapon? That's
my best
campaign
friend,
manager?
Blake. Yeah, it's Blake.
Blake, okay.
Blake. He's right across the hall.
Okay.
Best friend runs my official office, runs my campaign office, does it all. And he's literally, you would never want him on your podcast because he's just so robotic. He'd be like, okay, yes, I think I gave you a sufficient amount of answers. I'm done.
Yeah, then he's done,
away.
yeah.
I mean, he's got like
Do
a
you care to
Terminator.
elaborate? He's like, no, that's it.
Nope, they gave you the answer already. That's right. Yeah. Really good guy. You can trust him literally when he says something, that is the word and that is the truth.
Right.
But he's very robotic and he has all the skill sets that I do not have. But he's great at building systems, building organizations. The reason we were able to win our election against a lot of career politicians and a bunch of people who do this for a living is because we played our game like Moneyball. We're going to be totally out of the norm. No one's ever ran an election like this. But
what are some of the things you guys did differently?
So normally, I need about 390,000 votes to win my election.
Okay.
393, and so instead of, because we have people come up after every speech, hey man, I'd love to help you, believe in everything you're saying, what can I do? If I walked up to you, you're incredible, you're a high achieving human being. If I said, hey man, I need 393,000 votes, you would say, that's great. I mean, I got kids. I don't know if I can do that.
Right.
But if you came up to me and I said, okay, cool. What neighborhood do you live in? I'd then bring up an app that he designed.
Mm-hmm.
We would then go through it. I would say, oh, you live in Rugby Knolls. Oh, that's a great neighborhood. Cool. I need 7 votes out of that neighborhood. Can you get 7 people to say they will vote for me? And then on election day, call them back up and make sure they've already voted. And then
manageable. Sure.
Like, yeah, I know 7 people in my neighborhood.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
And so we broke our election down into bite-sized pieces. And to where we didn't just know our total vote number, because a lot of people that run elections, they don't even know how many votes they need to win, which is asinine.
Yeah, that'd be the first thing.
You would think so,
Yeah.
but a lot of these people, and then some of them get elected, and it's like, when I first got up here, I always thought to myself, man, how in the world did I get elected? Praise God. But now I look at these people, like, how did they get elected? I mean, seriously. But anyway, so I when we endorse somebody, we will really back them, and it means they're ideologically aligned. So we'll send him down to then have him teach their campaign team the plan. So okay, you need to get all your county maps. I'll teach you how to highlight them all,
right?
And then we'll teach you how to utilize a volunteer force.
So this is interesting because when you're talking about presenting this bill, this term limit bill, you're not just presenting the bill, you're thinking about the entire game plan, which means that I need to get other people elected who will vote for this bill.
Right.
Yes. That's got to be the fun part.
That's
that
the fun part.
strategy, that game, that succeeding, allowing it to happen, seeing it work. That's pretty
So
cool.
my plan is we will introduce this bill probably one term before my last term.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Lord willing, I get reelected and the people of Western North Carolina still love me.
Hopefully, right?
They could change their mind. That's totally fine. That's their prerogative. But
Right.
my plan is right before I plan to spend my last term, I will introduce it one term before that, because then I don't expect it to pass that first time. Hopefully I will have gotten a good contingent of about 50 people elected by then who will believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people who voted against it, I will remember their name and I will go to your district and I will beat you. And then that's I think that's what it's going to have to come down to. But we will. I hope it doesn't, because right now term limits make the most sense. We need term limits on politicians and bureaucrats.
Sure.
People shouldn't be able to spend their whole lives here. But anyways,
When you're saying bureaucrats, you're saying non-elected.
non-elected entities,
Type.
humans,
Right, sure.
who just are not elected, and it's almost impossible to fire a bureaucrat. They're so strongly unionized. I mean, once you fire somebody, they have to have the ability to go. I apologize, I'm having to check the floor.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
You're okay?
Yep, good to go. Once these people get hired, I mean, if you wanted to fire one of them, then they say they have to go see a specialist. And if they said, oh, you know what, my father actually yelled at me when I was 8 years old. Oh, they suffered a childhood trauma. We have to take that into account. So you're actually discriminating against people who have faced trauma. So, you're a bigot, and they get to
Yeah,
keep
of course,
working
yeah.
here. And it's awful. It's impossible to fire. Now, Blake is a political appointee. People in congressional offices, the reason they work so hard is because they're political appointees. I can fire them with no recourse, no reason.
Sure.
They serve the pleasure of the office.
Yeah, and your voters trust that you'll make the best decisions.
Exactly.
And if they feel like you won't, then
They get
then
to
you
get
won't
rid
have
of
a
us.
job either.
Exactly. Yes, yes.
That's right.
Yeah, and so, but really, I genuinely believe the whole thing is to send the power back to the states. I think we should have 50 incredibly robust and different states, where some things are legal in some states where others aren't. And so then you can choose where you want to live.
And that's the beauty. That is more available than any other time in history.
Right.
I'm talking about being able to move from California to Maine to Texas to North Carolina, whatever.
We've got the infrastructure. You can literally drive there.
And I think actually COVID has enlightened us quite a bit as to, oh, you mean I don't need to drive into the city every day?
Yep.
And commute 4 hours a day to get to this job that I hate? And people are realizing, this is one of the silver linings of the reaction to COVID, is that people have realized, oh, there's a different way to live that isn't so miserable. Frankly.
Exactly. I know. I completely agree with that, because a lot of these people live inside of these cities because they feel like they need to for work. But
right.
I promise, if you live outside the city, you own your own land, you bring your own land up, you will feel so much more spiritually wealthy.
Yeah, yeah. So what's next for you? I know if you're able to pass what you want to pass, you won't be here forever. So what would be next for you? What would be the path?
You know what? I would. There's so many different things. I've just got so many years ahead. Love to just raise my family, enjoy that. I want to get income taxes out, federal income taxes gone, and term limits on Congress. Then I'm done here.
Federal income tax completely eliminated?
Yes.
And so what would be, now look, this is going to be a whole other 2-hour conversation. I haven't heard you say this. So what's the path?
Path for that is just that you're taxed enough already. I mean, literally, you're taxed when you make money. You're taxed when you want to spend that money. Then you're taxed when you want to keep the things that you bought that you already taxed on. Mm-hmm. And then when you die, you're taxed on that again. It's insane.
Yeah.
And so I think we just need to completely oversimplify our tax system to where basically you just spend a significant amount of money on the tax would be higher on consumption.
Right.
So you buy
sales tax type.
Sales tax,
right,
are higher.
property tax and stuff. Okay.
But then you don't have to pay taxes on your income, and I think that would make everything so much easier.
Interesting.
Yeah, and because I believe it was the 14th or the 18th Amendment to the Constitution that allowed Congress to start taxing your income, because that was never supposed to be a thing.
Right.
Because really, your money is your money, and you should only. I think that. Then we should tax people if they would like to use our infrastructure and the markets that we have built and the systems that we have built for you to be able to buy things. Then, you pay tax to keep everything up, provide for the military. But the money that you make is not the government's.
I mean, I agree. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
How's married life?
Wow.
That's relatively new.
So I'll tell you, being a good member of Congress and being a good husband, it's a hard line to walk.
I imagine.
My wife is tough as nails. Literally, her skin is so much thicker than mine.
She's got to be.
She's just a badass. Super, super attractive, super smart, super funny. Most fun, down-to-earth woman I've ever met, and she's so fun to hang out with.
How does she deal with the personal attacks and vitriol towards you?
She gets so much angrier than I do. I mean, she'll just chew somebody out to their face. I'll be, honey, well, they can believe what they want. They have a constitutional right to redress their government. It's okay. But the personal attacks against me, I mean, she gets more upset about it, and then, the classic attacks we always get, oh, you're a racist. Oh, I'm Hispanic and Haitian. What are you talking about? Yeah. And so, but you know what? I really try to insulate her from the political world. I mean, I think I would come to fisticuffs if somebody ever forced their way to try and interview her. Yeah. I mean, I keep press away from her. I try to keep her out of the limelight. She's an incredible person, but I don't think she needs to suffer for my job.
That's a good point. I mean, I think that is part of our job as men, is not to shield them from life, of course, but you're the protector,
You're just supposed to stand in between them and the chaos, I believe, though.
Yeah. There's a great quote. It's, the real man gains renown by standing between his family and destruction, absorbing the blows of fate with equanimity. And so as you say that...
That's phenomenal.
It's a great quote. And so as you say that, that's what I think. You're standing there between the media, between the attacks, between the this and the that, between them and her, with equanimity, calmness, clarity, coolness.
Wow. That's phenomenal. That's exact. And imagine, I mean, you're, I'm very jealous. I'm going to catch up soon, but you've got more kids than me. I don't have any kids yet. Very excited for that.
You're going to catch up? You want four or more?
Oh, man, I think 4 would be great.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I've gotten Christina up to 2. We're still working on getting her up to 3.
So you still have a little bit to go.
Yeah, so we're working her up on that number and then down on how long to wait for kids.
Yeah.
But we're having so much fun in life. It's just, we're still in the honeymoon phase. So
yeah, man.
Marriage is awesome.
I love it. I mean, obviously we're friends, but I see your stuff on Instagram, and I just see you living life, and it's awesome.
That's great.
I'm so excited for you to see it.
Well, thanks, brother.
All right, brother. I appreciate you. Appreciate your time. I'm excited to see where you take things, and I'm a big supporter of you, and so just appreciate you spending time with us, but then also showing my family around.
Hey, you've got a great family.
We sent them off a minute ago, but man, they had a ton of fun this afternoon.
And I got to tell you, you said you homeschool your kids and everything, and I think I'm so honored to be in the same generation as your children, and I think we should all be honored to be in the same generation as each other, because the world has had this unprecedented period of peace and prosperity like it's never had before.
Yeah.
But 100 years ago, 1920 started off pretty rough and got even rougher, and so I think we may be destined for some difficult times. And I believe, I think that I'm a strong believer in God, so I think that we were all put here purposely for the time. He chose us for this time. And I think that we're going to face some dark days in the future. And I think that, it's we're born for such a time as this. And so to any of the young people listening to this, I'm honored to be young with you all. We have many decades left to be able to make a better country, make a better place for our families, make a better world. And that's, I think, our duty as men.
Definitely. Well, it gives me hope, too, for what's to come.
It does.
Yeah, challenging times ahead, but we'll be able to.
But challenging times create strong men.
Yeah,
and women.
For sure. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
You're the best. See you, man.